Was that what got you out of law? Because you didn't stay as a lawyer. Was that the thing that took you out, or was it something else?
No, I carried on with my private practice for a long time. My husband came to me one day and he knew that I was writing some. He didn't know exactly what my interest was, but he said, if you want to be a writer, you should just go ahead and retire early. Um, I'm doing well. We don't have children. We just have dogs and cats. Um, Being in the law is kind of a crazy making profession. It's very stressful. It's deadline after deadline. It's difficult people. You never know when your clients are telling you the truth. You never know what a jury's thinking. So I thought, well, this is kind of wonderful. I don't have to keep doing this. Not that I didn't enjoy practicing law, but there was a lot going on.
Yeah.
So I did. I closed. It took me two years to wind down my practice, but yeah. So I did close things up, and I just started writing.
Yeah. So how long ago was that?
Well, gosh, it's been 20 years now, I guess, almost 20 years. It's been
So
quite
we
a while.
so we come to your life as a writer at last. 20 years of being a writer. Why don't you talk about that?
A friend of mine from high school that I had not seen or heard of in all that time got in touch with me and said that she had a writers group and wondered if I would be interested. So I rode my motorcycle out there to her meetings, and there was a very nice group of people. They had an in-house publisher of a sort. They had two women that were members of the group who ran a small press, and they decided that they would begin publishing anthologies of short stories. So I wrote a short story. It was my first Jesse Carr story, and and it was published. And then we did another one the next year, and another one the next year. I think there were five anthologies before those the company, the small press closed because one of her partners died. And the other partner who was left decided that she didn't want to carry on without her dear friend. They've been in business a long time. Well, fortunately for us, it was about the time that self publishing began to appear on the horizon. And we really didn't know how to do it. So we began teaching each other how you would publish your own books. And since then, we have published eight more anthologies. This one that we just finished on superstitions is our 13th anthology, interestingly enough.
Yeah. Was that a coincidence?
It is.
That's funny. I didn't know that. Um, so there's a couple things about your life as a writer. One of them is your passion for biking, which I think you haven't been able to indulge lately, but it's still worth talking about.
Yeah, for 30 years, I rode a motorcycle.
Yeah.
I was head of a women's motorcycle club here in Houston called the Lone Star Ladies of Texas. And we rode essentially every weekend. And we began to take longer and longer trips. We would pack everything on the bikes and we would travel out of state. Um, Eventually, I was riding mostly with my business partner, who was my writing partner and my riding buddy. And we traveled, we would lead groups on tours. We went to North Carolina twice. We went to Colorado and New Mexico and Missouri and Oklahoma. And I went through all the southern states, I think three times. So got to see a lot of the country. I ended up with about 300,000 miles on a motorcycle.
Nice. That's a lot of fun. Talk about screenwriting because this is something you fell into and really enjoy.
I can't really remember why I decided that that was the thing to do, except that I knew I would need to learn to really tell a tight story.
Hmm.
And I wanted to tell stories. My family, especially my mother's family, were full of wonderful storytellers. My father was a great jokester. He told great jokes. But my mother's people they would all gather in a room and they would sit in a huge circle And they would somewhat take turns around the room telling stories, usually something about the family or something in the community. And some of them were hysterically funny, always very entertaining. And I thought, oh, I wish I could tell stories like that. And I didn't expect to be able to tell them orally like they did, but I thought I would like to learn how to tell a story better. And I knew that screenwriting would require that. I mean, you only have 100 pages roughly, and a lot of that's white space. So you have to make sure that it's all very tight and tied together. And then I began taking classes. Then I went to LA several times, quite a few times, for writers' conferences. Um, just about 3 years ago, I began studying with a man who's taught me amazing things. I have probably had every book on screenwriting I think that was published. But when I began to work with him, his name is Mitch German, and he has a program called Your Storytelling Potential. So it's not how to write a screenplay, it's how to tell a story.
Yeah.
And it works for novelists or not so much for short storytellers because you don't have all that much space to develop a story in. But if you're writing a novel or you're writing a screenplay, then this is the kind of thing that you want to know.
Uh, let's talk about Jesse Carr, a very important person in your life. You've already mentioned that Jesse Carr is your main character in a lot of your stories and novels. Who is she and why is she so important to you?
Well, she's a biker chick, so that was dear to my heart. Um, when I first envisioned Jesse Carr, she was really a badass. She was an assassin. And in fact, one of my friends has said to me recently, Jesse hasn't killed anybody in a while. Well, this is true because she's found other ways of making sure that the bad guy is brought up, stopped, taught a lesson. And I think that probably comes out of my time as a prosecutor, that
Yeah.
I really wanted to see bad guys punished. And then, too, I've learned after I began writing about Jesse that those kinds of stories are very appealing all over the world. People like to see justice, they like to see um, a story where there's bad guys and the good guys win.
Speaking of good guys and bad guys, as a child, we talked about your sense of wonder and your, eagerness to embrace the world and get into it. As a just plain person, and then later as a prosecutor, you came in contact with some very unsavory people, some dangerous people, hurtful people. You came very close to these people. You were in great proximity to them, and as you've mentioned in your trial thing, you were even in harm's way. Talk about the you say you've still been able to keep your sense of wonder. How did you do that? I mean, how do you come in contact with such danger and still remain open?
A garden. Um, I love being outside. Of course, being on a motorcycle, you're outside. And that's an experience. It's not like being in a car. Not only is it more dangerous, but everything comes at you. It comes at you very fast, but you have wonderful odors of the world, of grass being mowed and plants being planted and animals out in the pastures. And so there are all these sensory things that you're taking in as you're riding. And it's cold sometimes, or sometimes it's hot, but sometimes it's very cold. Um, so that is a help. I have animals. I've had 27 years of Siberian Huskies. We had three. I now have a golden doodle, and she's delightful. She's quite a character. I had cats, and of course, cats are great to snuggle with, but our cats were always very special cats. So that helps. Um, I felt as though my husband knew what that kind of life was because he was in it as well. And I felt protected. And we still do a lot of fun things. We go to concerts and plays, and we still, now we're beginning to travel again. We're about to take off in about 6 weeks for a trip to Greece and Turkey, places that he has and I have both wanted to go. I wanted to go to Crete, we're going there. He wanted to go to Turkey, we're going there.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun.
Well, it sounds like you have cultivated a habit of forcing yourself to remain open to the world. Like, I'm not going to let the people that I've come in contact with shut me down. You've made an active effort in whatever way you can to remain open and engaged.
Yeah, I've been through some difficult times, but you survive and you do get stronger. And part of being stronger is um, not letting it shut you down.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. Um, I'm sure there are people who are writers watching this, and their response is going to be, "Oh my God, you've been through so much. I haven't been through anything." What would you say to somebody who wants to write but feels like they've just haven't lived, they have nothing to say?
Oh, everybody has something to say. Um, if you if you want to write, you do have to master some skills, and there are different ways that you can learn to do that. I think one of the best ways is the way that they used to do it in the 1800s, 17 and 1800s, which is you read. And I've been very upset to hear that recently it's hard to find high school students who've read any books for fun. That's a tragedy.
Yeah.
Certainly, if you want to be a writer, you read. And it doesn't have to be what you want to write, it's the same kind of material, but you do learn about how to tell a story and how to put sentences together and how to increase your vocabulary. Um, so that's and then I think part of it is finding what is the key, the core, the essential fascinating core of your story idea. I was at a book signing not too long ago, and a terrific writer, his name is John Connolly, who's an Irishman, he pointed out that many times writers run into a block, and they may be 20,000 words into their story, and it happens, and it's like hitting a wall. And for many people, the first thing they decide is, oh, it wasn't such a good idea after all. He said, no, that's really not the way to think about it. Chances are it was a good idea. The problem is when you hit that wall, you just kind of have to make sure that you're going to grind through it. If you just keep going forward with it, you will come out the other end of it, and you will find perhaps that you overcome that block, whatever it was. So I think for people that want to be a writer, that's one of the things to keep in mind, is that your idea of what you want to write came out of your life, came out of your mind. And even though you may hear people say, well, every story's been told, there's nothing new. That's not quite true. Everybody is new in some way and has their own insights and their own values and their own reactions to things. So identifying those is how you find that essential, fascinating nugget that is your story.
Tell us, how do we find out more about you if we're dying to read your books or just learn about you?
Well, all of our anthologies are for sale on Amazon. I think the first two are out of print, but there are people out there that still have them and they're still selling them. So I have a profile on my Amazon page. Um, I would say that's probably the best way. Um, we also sell our books independently, but I mean, people can always, pretty much always find me if there's a book of ours that you want. And I'm writing a novel.
You want to talk about it?
Oh, sure. It's a Jessie Carr story, but it's Jessie that's a little bit different. She's not exactly a mind reader and she's not a psychic, but she has keen intuition and she's very observant. And it's developed into almost a mind reading capability. which is very helpful if you're talking to a bad guy to know what's in their mind. It takes place on the moon. I've created a colony, an outpost that's called Five Colonies, which has been built by a trillionaire. And his name is Caleb Flanagan. And when he built it, it's it's like a donut and it spins because that's how you create artificial gravity on the moon. And it's divided into 5 sectors. And one of those sectors is a rainforest. And yes, it's possible to put a rainforest on the moon. The idea that Flanagan had was to bring up specimens of endangered species from the earthly rainforest because there's so many of them that are disappearing. So he wanted to preserve those species and he brought them to the moon. And then there's a murder. The murder is the chief biologist who's handling that part of the colony. And it gets very dark and very interesting before it's all over.
That's fascinating. I hope you will find a way to let us know when that comes out and maybe we can talk again.
Thank you. It's called The Dead Man in the Lambre Crater.
That's great. Cash Anthony, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Well, thank you, Adam. It's been a pleasure.
The pleasure is mine. And thank you very much, audience, for joining us. There are a lot of other writers in this little series. You notice we've been talking to writers for several years, and we hope you'll check them out as well. And if you're interested in music, of course, you know there's hundreds of videos about music, including how to practice and how to be a musician, plus interviews with people like Bruce Thomas from Elvis Costello and the Attractions. So check our videos out, like us, and subscribe. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.